The supermarket was unusually quiet that evening, the kind of quietness that feels heavy, almost watchful, as if the whole place is holding its breath. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale glow across the aisles, and the polished floor reflected every tense movement. And in the middle of that silent hum, a woman stood at the checkout counter with trembling hands, clutching a few crumpled bills and coins as though they were her last link to hope. Her voice was soft, almost breaking, when she whispered, "This is all the money I have." The cashier, barely older than a teenager, let out a mocking laugh loud enough for nearby customers to hear. His chuckle echoed, sharp and cutting, slicing through the fragile dignity she tried so hard to hold on to. No one knew her story, but in that moment, everyone saw her desperation and everyone heard that cruel laugh. What they didn't know was that everything was about to change. If you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us bring more life-changing stories to the world. Maria hadn't always been poor. There was a time, not too long ago, when she lived in a small but comfortable home with her husband and their daughter, a cheerful little girl named Emma. They had built a simple life filled with ordinary joys: morning pancakes, weekend walks, and late-night laughter over silly jokes. Maria worked part-time at a local bakery, and her husband, Daniel, worked construction. They weren't wealthy, but they were happy, and happiness had always been enough for Maria. Money was something you earned and spent carefully, but love was something you protected at all costs. At least, that's what she believed, until life took everything from her in a way she never could have prepared for. One rainy evening, Daniel didn't come home. It wasn't unusual for him to work late when projects were behind schedule, but something felt wrong. When the knock on the door came, Maria already felt the dread curling inside her chest. The officers stood with solemn eyes, their uniforms soaked from the storm outside. They spoke in gentle tones, but their words shattered her world into pieces she still struggled to assemble. There had been an accident at the site, a structural collapse. He hadn't survived. In that single moment, Maria became a widow and Emma lost the father she adored. The days that followed were blurred shadows of grief, funeral arrangement, condolences she barely heard, and the echo of Emma's soft cry. Every night Maria tried to stay strong for her daughter, but strength didn't pay the bills, and grief didn't put food on the table. The bakery had laid off several employees due to declining business, and Maria found herself among them. Her savings dwindled, her rent fell behind, and the landlord grew impatient. She took on whatever odd jobs she could find: cleaning houses, babysitting, doing laundry for busy families, but none of it was enough. And though she sought help from charities and social services, the waiting lists were impossibly long. On many nights, Maria ate nothing so that Emma could eat the little food they had. She fixed torn shoes with glue, turned old shirts inside out to hide stains, and pretended everything was okay when her daughter asked too many questions. Her biggest fear wasn't hunger or debt or eviction. It was Emma seeing her break, because if she broke, everything else would collapse too. On the day she walked into the supermarket, Maria felt the weight of everything pressing down on her. Emma had been sick for the past 2 days, with feverish eyes and shallow breaths that terrified Maria more than anything else she had faced. Her daughter needed soup, medicine, and something nourishing to help her recover. But all Maria had was a handful of coins collected from the bottom of drawers and pockets. She counted them 3 times before leaving home, hoping the total would magically grow. It didn't. The supermarket felt colder than usual, not just in temperature but in spirit. People walked past her without glancing up, their carts full, while her hands carried only a small can of soup, a pack of crackers, and a generic fever reducer that she prayed would help. Her clothes were worn, her cheeks hollow from skipped meals, and her eyes carried a heaviness that only someone who had suffered long could recognize. She approached the checkout counter, hoping the young cashier might show a little patience or kindness. He seemed bored, scrolling on his phone between customers, his name tag slightly tilted and his uniform wrinkled. When he saw Maria place her items on the counter, he raised an eyebrow, noticing how she clutched her coins. He scanned the items slowly, and the total flashed on the screen, an amount she knew she couldn't afford. Maria's hands trembled as she placed the bills and coins on the counter. She felt heat rush to her face as she whispered the words she dreaded: "This is all the money I have." The cashier froze, staring at the small pile of change as if it were inconvenience rather than a lifeline. Then he laughed. It wasn't just a small chuckle, it was loud, dismissive, and filled with ridicule. The sound hit Maria like a slap. Her heart clenched, and her face flushed with humiliation. Nearby customers turned to look. Some frowned, others pretended not to notice. A few shook their heads, silently judging her for daring to be poor in public. The cashier made a remark about people always trying to get discounts and how this isn't a charity. His words stung deeply, slicing through her already frayed hope. Maria swallowed hard, her throat tight, her eyes burning with unshed tears. She wanted to disappear, to escape the piercing eyes of strangers who didn't know her story, who didn't understand how hard she fought just to stand here. But then something shifted quietly, unexpectedly. An elderly woman nearby stepped forward. She had been observing Maria with gentle eyes, sensing something in her posture that spoke of quiet battles and silent suffering. She placed her own groceries down and approached the register with slow but determined steps. Without saying anything harsh, without shaming the cashier, she reached into her purse and pulled out bills far more than Maria needed. But she didn't hand it to Maria. Instead, she set it gently on the counter and looked the cashier in the eyes. Her gaze was calm yet firm, carrying a weight that made even the mocking teenager stand straighter. In a soft, steady voice, she told him that kindness costs nothing, but cruelty sometimes costs more than people realize. She said that the measure of a person isn't in their laughter at someone's misfortune, but in the compassion they show to strangers. The cashier's smirk faded, replaced by an uneasy silence as the customers around him shifted in discomfort. The supermarket felt different now, as if every heart in the room had been forced to confront the casual cruelty that had just occurred. But the moment didn't end there. Behind the elderly woman, another customer, a middle-aged man in a business suit, stepped forward. He quietly added more money to the counter and gently pushed Maria's items closer to her. He didn't look at her with pity but with respect, as though acknowledging her strength. And then another woman, holding a toddler, offered to pay for a few more things that Maria might need, insisting she accept them. Maria stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sudden wave of kindness. Tears finally spilled down her cheeks, not of shame, but of relief, gratitude, and the realization that she wasn't as alone as she thought. She tried to refuse, shaking her head, insisting she couldn't take so much, but they encouraged her softly, telling her that helping someone in need wasn't a burden, but an honor. The cashier, now visibly embarrassed, rang up the items quietly. He avoided eye contact with everyone, especially Maria, as he handed her the bag of groceries, now much fuller than what she had placed on the counter. His voice came out low, almost apologetic. The moment had changed him as much as it changed everyone else who witnessed it. Maria walked out of the supermarket with bags heavier than her hands were used to carrying, but with a heart much lighter than it had been in months. The sky outside was overcast, yet somehow brighter than before, as if the world had softened just a little. When she returned home, Emma's tired eyes brightened at the sight of warm food and her mother's relieved smile. Maria fed her gently, feeling hope bloom again, fragile but real. Over the next few weeks, the kindness shown that day created ripples in Maria's life. The elderly woman reached out to her with community resources, helping her find temporary assistance programs. The man in the suit connected her with a cleaning job at his office after hearing she was seeking work. And the young cashier, humbled by what happened, approached Maria one day to apologize sincerely. He admitted that he had acted out of ignorance and immaturity, not understanding the burdens others carry. Maria forgave him, not because she had to, but because forgiveness felt lighter than holding on to hurt. Slowly, Maria rebuilt her life. It wasn't easy, and some days were still hard, but she no longer carried her struggles alone. She had learned that even in the darkest moments, kindness can appear unexpectedly, softening hearts, mend wounds, and reminding us that humanity still exists in quiet, overlooked corners of the world. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support inspires more heartfelt stories like this one. Before you go, comment below and tell us, what's one act of kindness you'll never forget?